Welcome back to another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial, and in today's video we are going to make sure that we can replicate all this stuff. So as you can see, they can see me build something. Obviously the preview is not going to be replicated. I don't see any reason in the preview to be replicated, but once we place the build down, everybody can see it, and also everybody can go ahead and interact with it. So as you will see, he says I need 4 logs. So I'm going to walk up to this. He also will say I need 4 logs, so I can go 1, 2. There we go. And this guy is also informed that I need only 2 logs. We can go ahead, finish the build, and then we can go ahead and destroy it. There we go. So let's begin. So that day is finally here that we are going to replicate this building system. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be worried and scared, and this is the replication part is, oh my god, all this complicated stuff. Hopefully, I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible, and we should be done within this one video. And I'm going to do my best to try to explain why and when and what we are actually going to replicate. So, first thing, the testing part. On the play mode, I'm going to have 2 players, and both of those are going to be client, because it's going to make my life a little bit easier testing with just 2 clients rather than having the server as well. But usually if the server runs it, well, if the clients run it properly, then the server is going to run it properly as well. Now, the next most important part is going to our actual buildables and making sure that these actors are replicated as well, because as of right now, everybody can spawn these, nobody can really see these. So open up your build master, select the class defaults, make sure that the actor is replicated. So check this. Also, we're going to have some movable actors that are going to have their meshes changed, their locations changed. So go ahead and make sure that their locations are also replicated, like so. The next thing is replicating the components themselves. So select the component, scroll down to the very bottom, and go ahead and replicate the component. Now we're going to do these steps once more for our build window, but we're going to do that at the end of the video. First, we're going to make sure that all the other buildables are ready to go. So the next thing is to replicate some of the variables. Now, we actually don't need all of these variables anymore. We don't need the cost variable, and we don't need the resources placed variables. So you can go ahead and delete those, but all the other ones, like the materials, should have their replication rule set to replicate it. Same goes for is finished. Everybody got to know when it's finished. Everybody probably will want to know what this index is, what the resources and all the buildable information is, what is the current status of the buildable's health, and whether the buildable is dead or alive, whether it needs to be destroyed or not, and also the build children, which are going to get destroyed with this thing as well. There we go. So far so good. Variables are replicated, actor is replicated, components are replicated. Now that's not all that we need. Obviously, we're going to need a lot of different things as well. So first and foremost, whenever we spawn this thing, we got to make sure that we do that on the server side. Now, I believe that I just now noticed I'm missing a node over here. I might have missed it by testing some things. So if you have it missing, go ahead and make sure that your materials are getting set over here, like so. I'm not sure where did that one go, but it should have been there. Otherwise, well, we don't really store our materials. Now, but back to spawning this thing, we got to make sure that we spawn this actor from the server side. Always we got to spawn actors from the server side so that everybody would be able to see them. Now, to do so, we got to go to our third-person character first. Over here. So now I'm instantly over here because I was looking at it previously. So this is my mouse left button event, which when these conditions are true, goes ahead and spawns a buildable. Now this is not going to be enough, and also if we make this into just a server event, it's also not going to be necessarily enough, because so let's set it up. So we're going to need this regardless. So I'm going to add a custom event, and I'm going to call this server spawn build. And this thing right here needs to have its replication rule set to run on server so that the server would do this task. The next thing would be to run this guy right here. So I'm going to move it over here, run it. And then from true, instead of running the components function, I'm going to run our server spawn build. Now this still isn't going to work. And the reason for this is that If we go inside of this build component now, none of these variables are replicated. All of these values are stored locally, and there is no real reason for them to be basically stored outside of the local space. There is no need for everybody to know what is the build transform and all that stuff, because that is just the preview. We are not going to replicate the preview. It is quite pointless. It is a lot of bandwidth that needs to be sent very, very often, because our relay speed is it's quite quick. So we're going to constantly be sending information to the server, which is completely useless. So instead, we need to provide these variables as inputs and then provide them from the client side, and then the server will be going to go ahead and doing all the rest. So we're going to need to add a bunch of inputs here. Now, the first one, as you can see, the first thing that we do is an if branch check, which is check if we are moving an actor or we are placing down an actor. I'm going to call this variable just moving, and I'm going to try to name these a little bit different so that we don't necessarily get confused when we are trying to get these. So I'm just going to call this moving. Now let's add the next one. So the first one is Boolean, so this guy right here. Then let's recreate these two. So we have the movable actor, so I'm just going to call this movable, and the type needs to be actor, so exactly the same types as before. Then we have the build transform, which I'm just going to simply call transform, and now this is transform, and this is going to be a transform type. So let's look further. So nothing over here. Let's go down here. We have the buildables database and buildables ID. So I'm going to add both of those as well. So I'm just going to call this DB database. This is going to be our S buildables structure array. And the next one is going to be our ID, which is an integer. Then we have the build transform, which we already have. Again, the same variables, same variable, hit actor. Okay, so we do need that one. Let's go ahead, let's add that one, and I'm just going to call this hit and make this into an actor. There we go. So I think I have all the variables that were needed, and now let's go ahead and let's provide these, basically replace all of these. So I'm going to delete this is moving, right click, and I'm going to get just the moving. So this is the one from the inputs. So that's why I named these a little bit different, so it's easier for us to find them. Then we need the get movable. Replace that one, get transform, replace that one. There we go. So that's good. Let's go down below to over here. We need to get the database, DB, and get the ID. There we go. And then just like previously from the database, we can get a copy to this ID. Then we can go ahead, right click this, split it, and reconnect the pins. So I'm just going to hold control and drag and drop these to over there and to over there. And then we can delete this. Move this inside of its place, and we're good to go with this one. And we have the build transform. So from here, we've got to get the transform. So again, our input variable. Then I'm going to go ahead, copy these, paste them over here. But since it's not split over here, it's combined. So I'm going to right click and recombine this. And then I'm going to delete these variables and place these ones instead. So we have the buildable and we have the ID. There we go. Now we have another one over here. So again, I'm going to delete this. Yeah, that's not the one that I wanted to paste. I want to paste these ones in. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the avoid adding as child and replace the hit actor with get hit. So basically we are grabbing all the variables that we will pass along from the input and plugging it in instead of using the local variables, because if we are a server, because this thing is getting ran, will be ran and already is ran from an event which is getting ran on the server, and server doesn't know any of these values. For server, all of them are going to be set to default, and that's not what we want. So we got to make sure that we pass along the values that we have set up, and yeah, that's exactly what we are going to do. So this event is all good. Let's go back to our third person character where we actually run this, and I'm going to disconnect this because we are going to need this in a second. But the first thing is connecting all the necessary variables. So we have the target, which I'm going to rename to comp, so basically the component. That's going to be our build component. and then just drag and drop all of these on top of this event, and it's going to create these inputs automatically for us. Here we go. So that's good to go. And the next thing is now actually providing them over here while we are still on the local space, because this is the client's part of the code, and this one over here then continues as the server one. So the first thing, build component goes into the comp, and I'm actually going to go ahead and copy this once more, because now we need to drag from this and get all these variables. So we have the is moving, we want to get that, then we have the get movable actor, we have the get build transform, we have get buildables, we have get build ID, and we have get hit actor. There we go. Now with this being done, what we can do is go ahead and connect all of these, so like so, and there we go. So this is all good and fun, good and done, all that nice stuff. So I believe, can we spawn something? Yeah, we can spawn something, but as you can see, it instantly gets finished. We can walk inside of it. It's gonna glitch out a lot. Also, it's gonna tell us that we need some resources, because, well, it's not fully replicated just yet, but it is getting spawned. So that's a start. That's something good. Now, the next step is to go ahead and open up the actual buildable. For now, that's gonna be it for this one. Let's finish off with just placing it down correctly, because now it's just getting spawned, and it is using instantly the default whatever it is that we have, whatever that we have, but it's not really changing the materials and all that stuff. It does set up the material array, it does change the mesh, but it never does this bit. So now to go ahead and fix this whole issue, what we want to do is go ahead and, instead of running this on the server, we want to go ahead and multicast this. Now we could have ran some kind of a multicast task event inside of the build component whenever we ran this set mesh, but I think that's a lot of things to add even more over here. It's going to be a lot simpler to do this inside of our build master. So we can go ahead and create us a custom event, which we're going to call multi-set mesh. And let's make sure that this event right here is a multicast event. And let's make sure it also has the same inputs, which is a single static mesh input. So I'm going to add that. Let's call this mesh. And this is the static mesh type. Just a static mesh, not the actor, not the component, just static mesh. Like so. Now that we have done this, we can go ahead, disconnect this, select all of these nodes, and bring them down to our multicast event instead. So now our multicast event, just make sure you reconnect the mesh to the static mesh over here. Our multicast event is going to take care of all of this stuff. It's going to set the mesh, store the materials in their memory, and change their materials and collision rules. Now we just got to make sure that we actually run that. So from the set mesh, we're going to run our multi-set mesh instead and connect the mesh value. Like so. So now we should be able to build, and it should be transparent, and we should be able to walk through this, and we shouldn't have any odd collision issues or anything like that. There we go. So that's good. So one thing finished. Now let's move on to the next couple of things. So we have the set build cost, which is perfectly fine just getting ran on the server, because all we do is set these three variables, which are going to get set up properly, because at this point it's going to be a server task, because if we look in our build component, this is where we run this from. So add build child and set build cost are going to be server events, because they got ran from over here from the server spawn build. So this is already the server space, and it's no longer the client space. So these two inside of our build master, so this guy and this guy, are going to get ran properly as long as these variables are replicated. So make sure you have these symbols next to them. That will mean that they are replicated. If they are not, select the variable and change its replication rule to replicated. There we go. Let's have a look what we have next. So the next thing is we have the interact with build. This is going to be a little bit more simplified. We don't need to necessarily run multicast on all of those things. They should work just fine with just these things, because over here again we just set some variables, and setting variables usually works perfectly fine just on the server space. So we're going to do this the other way around. Previously we started with running the server event from the character. This time we're going to start with the multicast event from the build master while we are still here. So real quick, another custom event, and let's call this multi interact with, or let's just call this multi finish build. That's going to be a better name because we are finishing a build at this point. Now let's make sure that this event is a multicast event, and all we got to do is disconnect this and bring it over to our multicast event instead. And then from here, once we get to this point, at the end of this, we just run that code that we had previously through this multi-finish build. So very simple. That's all we got to do, and it's going to be just fine, as long as now we make sure that we run this from the server side. So let's go back to our third-person character, and I believe mine is in the... Good question. I have so many event graphs in this project. This is too messy. I think this is in the needs action mapping. There we go. So I have my keyboard key E event, and I have this interact with build. Instead, again, we need another custom event, which is the server interact with build. And this event right here needs to be a ran on server event. I'm going to go ahead, copy and paste this interact with build so it's a little bit quicker. All I'm going to do is go ahead and connect these like so. So it automatically creates the inputs for me. I'm going to select this, and I'm going to rename this to be actor instead of the target. Otherwise, we're going to have two targets. So where this event is located and this other one that got named as a target. So now instead of running directly the interact with build, instead we're going to run server interact with build. So let's look for server interact with build. Hold control, reconnect the pins, and target goes into the actor and item goes into the item. We can delete this, and now we should be able to spend resources and finish the build. So let's give it a test. Let's build something with this guy. So he can see needs 4 logs. Didn't mean to click any of that. So let me pick up some logs. I didn't update the inventory. Should have done that. So 1, 2. As you can see, both screens immediately recognized that there is a resource added, and it removed the amount. So as you can see, there we go. It is finished, and there's no collision issues now. We can walk on top of it, no glitching whatsoever, and everybody can see this buildable being finished. So that's good. Now the last piece, so real quick, let me expand my inventory. That's going to be super quick, so I can pick up more logs basically. Now the last piece is making sure that whenever we deal damage and destroy the buildable, so that it actually does get destroyed and all that good stuff. So exactly the same thing pretty much as we did with interacting over here. After we said that the build is dead, when we change its visibility, when we change its collision rules, add another component, all that stuff, we're going to move this down and disconnect it, and we're going to run this from a custom event and call this multi destroy build. Plug that in and make this into a multicast event instead. Here we go. Now one thing real quick, we got to make sure that we select our build component, our destructible component rather, add destructible component. Scroll down till the very bottom and make sure to replicate physics on this one. I'm not sure if you have simulate physics. I think I clicked it on accident previously. We'll see. And if it was enabled for you, feel free to leave it enabled. I don't think it really matters that much, but I think for the multiplayer part it would be better if it's enabled. We're going to see that in a second. So let's just run this now from our, after we set that the build is destroyed, so we can run our multi-destroy build. That's good. And the last piece, again, just like previously, is making sure that this deal damage is getting ran from the server side. So again, in our third-person character, we got to look for it. Mine, I think, is over here. I have keyboard key 2. So this deal damage needs to be ran from the server side. So again, custom event server damage build. Let's make sure this is ran on server. I'm going to disconnect this, reconnect it over here, connect the target, connect the damage, rename the target to an actor so I don't have double targets, and from here server damage build. Let's right click, refresh node. There we go. Now it's named an actor. Good. Plug that in. Provide damage of 25. So let's give this the final test because I think we have replicated everything. So let's try this out. Well, except for the window, but we're gonna replicate window in a second. So now I should have an expanded inventory, which I do. So that's a lot quicker now. So let's give it a try. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. There we go. Boom, boom, boom. And let's try to destroy this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So we need to enable physics. That's what I thought. So back in our build master, select the destructible component. Make sure you enable physics for this one. Otherwise, the destruction effect is not gonna look as good. So let's give it a shot. Let's try to destroy it and see what happens. So yeah, with the physics on, it is a lot better. And let's wait a couple of seconds for it to get destroyed. And there we go. It's all clean. It's all gone. No errors. Everything is replicated and everything looks good. So the last piece now is replicating the window. So this is the one actor in my specific system that does not use the build master. So we do need to recreate the functionality that we just made in the build master. So I'm going to open up both of these. I'm going to have the build master and the build window open at the same time so that basically we do not miss something, and so that we can actually copy these events so that we don't have to name them and change the variables. It's going to be a lot quicker if we just copy and paste. So let's start from the top again. So let's make sure that we first select simulation. First make sure we are selecting the class default, and then we scroll down till the replication. Make sure that the actor is the movement of the actor is replicated, and also so that the actor itself is replicated. Now the next thing would be to selecting all three of these components, scrolling down till the very bottom, and replicating the components themselves as well, because they are going to be moving, they will be changing materials, all that good stuff. So we want to make sure that that stuff is getting replicated, collision as well. Now the next step is replicating the variables. So we want to replicate pretty much everything. So the default rotations is opening, is open, very key. So this is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to have to do some adjustments in the door as well. Now the cost should be gone, resources placed should be gone, and then the rest of the variables again can be replicated. So let's do that. Replicate, replicate, replicate. There we go. Now let's have a look. So we have this set build cost, which is going to be replicated just like in the other actor, and then we have this on begin play event, which is this guy right here. Now let's do the same thing again as we did over there, but in this case this is going to be just a little bit different. Now we don't need to change the mesh and all that stuff that we did over here. So for this one, I'm actually not gonna copy this. Instead, I'm gonna create a new event for this specific instance, and I'm gonna call this multi what I called it, I called it multi set. I'm gonna call this multi begin play. Let's call it that way. And now what we want to do is, after we have set that variable right there, the materials variable, we're gonna run this code right here. And I'm just going to copy these nodes, paste them right here, and then we can run our multi begin play. There we go. So that should be good. Now obviously we're going to test that in a second. Then we have the interact with build. So as you saw, the opening and closing of the doors was working just fine. One thing though, we might want to replicate the timeline itself as well. So we want to click replicate it. Interestingly enough, it was already working. So that was nice to see. Other than that, we got to go ahead and replicate this bit right here. So let's have a look what we did in the build master. So in the build master, we had the interact is this one. So we had multi finish build. So I'm just going to copy this event directly into here. So I have the same name, same rules. All I got to do is hold control, reconnect it to over here, and realign the nodes to make it look better. And then at the end of this, we just run it. So multi finish build. Here we go. Another one down. And the next one is the destruction. This piece right here. So we want to replicate this part. So again, let's just copy the destroy, multi-destroy build node. Let's move all of these things out. Paste that in, reconnect it, and call it. So we're going to have our multi-destroy build from the is dead. Also, we want to make sure that our destructible components are replicated. So we're going to scroll down, make sure that these are replicated, physics enabled, and replicated on both of those. So I think that is it for the window. So let's just double check. Yeah, looks like that was pretty much it. So let's give it a try. Seems to be good, seems to be good, seems to be good. Here we go. So let's just double check some collisions. Can we jump through it? No, we can't. We open it and then we can. And destruction seems to work just fine. So yeah, replication is done. So yeah, thank you for watching and see you in the next one.